Hello my friends and welcome back to Spooky Snack. For today's video we are going to be talking about another local legend. So this is going to be a Bay Area story. Today we're going to be talking about the city of Colma, which, okay, you might already be thinking, wait, like a city, a whole ass city? Yes, girl. So the city of Colma is actually like a pretty small city. It's right outside of San Francisco. I have driven through it many times. I have been to the Target in the shopping center that's over there plenty of times. Colma, you see, is not a very typical city. It is predominantly a cemetery. The whole town is a cemetery town. The research that I found on Colma, let's just get on into it because this one's pretty interesting. Grab your spooky snack and let's hop right in. By the way, yes, I have bangs. I've had them for a few weeks. I don't know. I'm growing them out because I realized how high maintenance they are, but it was a fun little run. I think I might actually purchase some clip-in bangs just because I like having the option to wear them, but I just don't want to deal with the high maintenance-ness of this and them looking weird and them swooping, you know, not the right way and whatever. But enough talking about my hair. The city of Colma actually is a cemetery town. The living residents, there's only a little under than 2,000 living people who live in Colma, but there's almost 2 million people buried in Colma. That's right. So that makes that the ratio of dead to living in Colma around 1,000 to 1. As you can imagine, it's a different vibe. Now, I've never gotten a bad vibe anytime I've been in Colma, but when you stop and think about how many people are passed and buried there, it's a little unnerving. It does make you feel a little uncomfortable. I personally have never experienced anything bad or negative whenever I was there. One thing I actually found kind of interesting, it's rather funny, I guess you could say, is the city motto is "It's great to be alive in Colma," which, I mean, at least they can find some like quirkiness out of being a cemetery town. So let's get into the history of Colma and why it is actually a cemetery town. So in the early 1900s, San Francisco was actually really overtaken by the amount of deaths that they had in the area, and they actually ran out of space to house their dead. According to Colma historian Pat Hatfield, when the gold rush happened in California, a large amount of people obviously were traveling to California, and with them brought various diseases which caused quite a few deaths. Not only that, but also in the year 1900, San Francisco was stricken by the bubonic plague. Yes, the Black Death, the crazy disease that went rampant in Europe. It happened in San Francisco also in 1900. So as you can imagine, unfortunately, a lot of people passed away from the bubonic plague. And then in 1906, the massive San Francisco earthquake happened, which once again caused mass destruction, fires, and death all across the city. So, as you can imagine, the first few years in the 1900s were not the best. So like I said, San Francisco was completely overstrucken by the amount of death that was going on, to the point where they completely ran out of space in their 27 cemeteries. Now, not only were their cemeteries completely full, but they were falling into ruin. It was reported that city dogs would run through the cemeteries and find bones poking out of the earth and run off with them. Fraternities would often host initiation rituals and massive bonfires using the wooden stakes that were used to divide up the cemetery plots as firewood for their bonfires. And it was even to the point that homeless people were cracking open the crypts and taking up residence inside the crypts. So not only were these cemeteries way too full to bury any more bodies, but also the cemeteries were going to complete shambles. Like, things just weren't looking good for them. So to combat this, an ordinance was passed to prevent any more new cemeteries from being constructed in San Francisco. And because the existing cemeteries' conditions was such a problem, those who were buried there were evicted by 1914. Okay, that was rude. My camera totally just shut off on me. In defense of the legislation, Mayor Jim Rolfe said, quote, "The duty of the government is more to the living than to the dead," end quote. And thus, all of the bodies were moved by hand. Families could pay for private interments for their loved ones if they chose, but otherwise, all of the bodies were moved to mass graves in Colma. Gravestones were only moved if someone paid for its relocation, and unclaimed markers and monuments were used for public works, such as building seawalls, gutters, and retaining the walls of Buena Vista Park. Honestly, I feel like the amount of disrespect for the dead that came out of this might indicate low-key why Colma is a paranormal town. With that being said, not every body was moved from the old cemeteries in San Francisco to Colma. In the summer of 1993, during the renovation of the California Palace of Legion of Honor, around 300 corpses from the Gold Rush era were unearthed from an old graveyard. Some experts say that there might even be 11,000 other bodies under the museum. That place is probably for sure haunted too. See, in 1909, the city just knocked down all of the monuments and gravestones to put in the Lincoln Park golf course, and the museum was later added in 1924. So all of the bodies that would have been buried in that location were not necessarily removed. Their monuments and tombstones, however, were just used for various other things, and the golf course was just put right on top in its place. So, side note, that's actually the golf course that my boyfriend said when he was in high school. He went to Lincoln. They had to do golf practice there every time. So, he himself has had to play on top of the poor souls that rest in the Lincoln Park golf course. Bodies have been found in old cemetery locations even as recent as 2016. One San Francisco home in 2016 was renovating when workers... Hold on. Got it. Okay. When workers found a metal Victorian casket that housed a young girl from 145 years prior. See, the house was built over what used to be the Oddfellows Cemetery, and it's presumed that the poor young girl's grave must have just been forgotten about and left alone in that spot. Her body was thankfully later relocated and reburied in another cemetery in San Mateo County, but that's just so sad to think that this one girl was just left there. Some notable individuals who have been buried in Colma in various different cemeteries include the famous baseball player Joe DiMaggio, Abigail Fogel, who was a tragic victim of one of the Manson family murders, music promoter Bill Graham, newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, as well as his wife, and denim jean designer Levi Strauss. Now, there have been some rather terrifying crimes that have also occurred at the various Colma cemeteries. In 1997, the half-clothed body of Inga Makarov, I apologize if I'm not saying her name correctly, who was a 24-year-old sex worker from Russia, was found dead in the Colma Serbian cemetery. The autopsy showed that she had been beaten to death by a heavy object, but unfortunately, Her killer was never found, and it's actually still an open, unsolved cold case today. The only lead on the case that Sergeant Pete Renoise could come across was he connected it to a sex trafficking ring in San Francisco's Mission District, but that's the only lead on the case that they have so far. Another terrible instance occurred with an already convicted murderer in New Orleans confessed to murdering a woman in the 1980s in Colma. He said that he wrapped her body up in a rug and threw it into the woods. And officers obviously went to the location and they did find a woman wrapped in a rug in the trees next to Cypress Golf Course. Now, probably the most interesting and odd criminal case to have occurred, in my opinion, in the Colma cemeteries is this one having to do with 2 jarred hearts. On October 12th, 2010, a caretaker at Holy Cross Cemetery was just doing his caretaking thing, and he was in a more isolated area of the cemetery when he noticed what looked like the heads of 2 jars peeking out of the ground in front of one of the gravestones. Now, obviously, he knelt down to get a closer look to see what it was, saw that it was the lids to mason jars, so he went and he pulled it up out of the ground. And inside each jar was a severed human heart and the photo of a couple pinned to the heart. Now, one jar had one heart with one couple on it, and the other jar had another heart with a different couple on it. So obviously he immediately called police, and when they showed up, they were astounded to see that it literally was 2 human hearts with photos pinned to them. The officers also found partially burned cigars and candles in the same vicinity. The San Mateo County Coroner's Office did an autopsy and found that both hearts contained embalming fluid and that they must have came from dead bodies. Now, police also checked in to see if there were any graves that had been dug up or any missing bodies, and there were none listed at all in Colma or anywhere in San Mateo County. Now, this is yet another unsolved case. I couldn't find any additional information on if the police ever were able to, get DNA results on who these hearts belong to, who the couples in it were. Unfortunately, there was no additional information on this case or what was going on. The only theory that was listed in the news reports that I found was that police were trying to make a connection to this one Afro-Caribbean religion called Santeria, I think is how you say it. But many experts on Santeria said that there is no connection to it because there's no circumstances in which human sacrifices are ever called for. So I don't know why exactly the police made a connection specifically to Santeria. Personally, I think it's probably just some kind of weird, dark, sinister ritual that was probably done. I'm not going to claim any one specific religion is responsible for this because people in any category, they might claim that they are a part of whatever, and there's always going to be people who take things way too far. So I don't think any one religion is to blame. I just think some kind of dark, twisted individuals were up to this. Okay, now let's talk paranormal ghost stories of Colma. Also, don't mind the bangs. I am putting a lash on, so that's why they are pushed to the side and look freaky. So don't mind them. Now, one haunted story of the Colma cemeteries is there's reportedly a gargoyle-like creature that hops from tombstone to tombstone within the cemetery. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find any specific encounters with this gargoyle creature. This might have to do with the fact that most of the cemeteries are closed by 5:30, so anybody who would be in the cemeteries would be trespassing. So I don't know if that's why there aren't a lot of cases, but this is reportedly a ghost sighting that has occurred in the Colma cemeteries multiple times. Now, one interesting story, or this one's actually factual, one interesting event that occurred at the cemeteries was in 1997. There was a pine tree in one of the cemeteries that the sap pouring out of the side of the pine tree was in the perfect shape of the Virgin Mary. Because of this, a lot of people flocked to the tree and would leave gifts and pray to the Virgin Mary, and they looked at it as like a positive thing, as a positive sign, since it was the Virgin Mary. I mean, the picture of it, I can see the Virgin Mary in it, so it was really interesting, but not necessarily spooky. On a spookier note, there is the supposed ghost of a zombie that likes to roam around Colma. Now, this one was actually witnessed by a Colma police officer. I couldn't necessarily find the officer's exact name or his telling of the story, but supposedly it was a Colma police officer that witnessed this. Now, the legend goes that one night a Colma police officer was patrolling through the cemetery, which is reportedly very common. Colma is a really small town, so a lot of what the officers do is also patrolling through the cemeteries to make sure that no one's doing anything they're not supposed to be doing. So this one night, the officer was going through a cemetery when he noticed an old man. When he drove past him, he saw that his eyes were had black rings around them and were super sunken in, and he had blood dripping from his ear to his mouth. So obviously the officer pulled a U-turn to turn back to go see if the man needed any help or anything, but when he did, the guy vanished. He was nowhere to be found. Now, honestly, I like the idea of the story being true, but like I said, I could not find the specific officer who experienced this, or even a specific officer describing this story. This is kind of just like a rumor, it seems as though, but it would be crazy if an officer did see that one night while patrolling through, because like I said, not a lot of people are allowed into the cemeteries anyway, so if anyone was, it would probably be an officer who's supposed to be there late at night. So now, one specific location that is supposed to be quite haunted and a great place to experience the paranormal activity of Colma is the San Francisco Art Institute, which was built in 1925. Now, this building was built on the grounds of the Mission Cemetery in Russian Hill. Bill Morehouse, who was a student and the night watchman of the Art Institute, claims to have experienced quite a few crazy things while he was on night watch at the Art Institute. One night, he had heard the street-level doors, which he had locked, open and then close. He then heard footsteps climb up the 3 levels of stairs before the door to the room he was in opened. He was so scared that he almost jumped and ran out, but there was nobody there when the door opened. Many students have reportedly experienced crazy haunts over the years that they've been there. Everything from flickering lights to power tools turning on and off, tools going missing, and hearing various footsteps throughout the halls or up the stairs. And that, my friends, is the wild haunted history of the city of Colma. I don't know about you guys, but I believe it. I 100% believe it. Now, like I said, I personally have gone to Colma dozens of times. I've driven through, I've been shopping in, I've actually been to cemeteries in Colma. My boyfriend has family that's buried there and have definitely gone to visit over the years, but I have not personally experienced anything wild or haunted whatsoever. Warren and I actually did make a joke the last time that we were there, because people have been talking about how using their Tesla cars, the motion detection camera thing, we were joking around about oh, I wonder if people would come here to these cemeteries if they would experience anything. As I also mentioned, if I had that technology, I feel like I would want to see it happen, but I also wouldn't, because I feel like I'd be so freaked out, but I'd also be so excited all at the same time. So, but yeah, we knew that, we obviously knew that Colma was a cemetery town, but I never knew why. And I can only imagine the thousands and thousands of people who died during the early 1900s to cause like San Francisco to not let there be any more new cemeteries built. Like, that, those are some really unfortunate years. Let me know what you guys thought of this story. Do you think Colma is haunted? Have you been to Colma and experienced anything interesting? I have not actually been to Colma late at night now that I'm thinking about it, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But yeah, make sure to let me know down below if you've experienced anything crazy happening at Colma or if you've been to any of the cemeteries. I'm really vibing with the look today. I'm giving very like, oh my god, I'm giving Catherine from Vampire Diaries with the bangs and the big hair and the makeup. I feel like that's the energy. I hope you guys enjoyed today's story. Let me know in the comments down below if there's anything else that you'd like me to talk about in the future. Also, if you can, if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. It would really help me out a lot. And make sure that you subscribe down below to keep up with our future spooky snack episodes. Otherwise, I hope you guys are having a good day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.